Hey, what's up guys? This is Mr. Neely again with Grammar Lesson H. Alright, I promise today we're going to have a few special guests and maybe a few other surprises that's in store, so stay tuned. First off though, I do want to give a quick shout out to Constance Hale and her book Sin and Syntax. Alright, lots of the examples that I use or some of the wording that I may use in some of these videos is really influenced by her work in this book. If you're interested in language and grammar and you're like, hey, this grammar thing's pretty cool, I'd like to learn more about language and grammar and how it functions and how it affects my writing, you should check this book out. I'll have a copy in my classroom that you can look at, but you should be able to get it at your library or a bookstore. Alright, now today is Grammar Lesson H, and we are talking about compound complex sentences. So we've talked about simple sentences, we've talked about compound sentences, and we've talked about complex sentences. So it should be fairly evident what a compound complex sentence is. A compound complex sentence contains one or more dependent clauses and at least two independent clauses, right? So one or more dependent clauses and at least two independent clauses. In other words, it combines a compound sentence with a complex sentence. Remember, a compound sentence has two independent clauses that are married together and balanced, and a complex sentence has one dependent clause that depends on an independent clause to make a complete thought. Alright? Take a look at this image here. This is a compound complex sentence. Right? It says, I don't always get with dependent clauses, but when I do, we make one bleep of a sentence. Right? Now, I also promised some special guests today. So I'm going to go ahead and get those special guests to serve as an illustration for the compound complex sentence. Alright guys, so I have my special guest here with me ready to come in, but before we start, I want to set this up, right? So remember how we talked about sentences being stories, right? They're little mini stories, and we've talked about independent clauses and dependent clauses. Remember, an independent clause can stand alone. It's independent, right? So, for example, I am, in this example, am going to be an independent clause. Alright? I work at Bryan Station. That is an independent clause. It could stand alone by itself in a complete sentence. But we're not going to do that because we're going to introduce another independent clause. This is my wife, Neely. Right? Remember Neely. This is my wife, Neely. She's also an independent clause in this example. Alright, she could live independently if she wanted to. She could stand alone as her own story, but we've decided to do this story together, right? Equal parts. So, I work at Bryan Station and Neely stays at home. Right? Those are two distinct independent clauses that we brought together with a coordinated conjunction. And. Alright? Now, I have one more special guest.
Yeah.
Theo. This is my son Theo, right? If you see Theo's shirt, it says Mom's Little Squirt. Mom's Little Squirt. Alright? Now Theo is not independent. He could not live by himself and take care of himself, so he is dependent. Right? So because, now we're putting him into our compound complex sentence here. Because Theo is Mom's Little Squirt, my wife Neely stays at home, and I work at Bryan Station. Together, as you can see, he's pretty dependent. Right? As you can see, those parts work together, a dependent clause and two independent clauses to make a compound complex sentence. Say bye, guys.
Say bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Alright, so now that you've met my family, let's take a look at that sentence in wording. It says, because Theo is Mommy's Little Squirt, there's our dependent clause with our subordinating conjunction because Theo is Mommy's Little Squirt, Neely stays at home, and I work at Bryan Station. Neely stays at home, independent clause. I work at Bryan Station, independent clause, joined by a coordinating conjunction and a comma, right? So that's what the example looks like in words. Grammar lesson H continued. So take a look at these two sentences here and see if we can find the subjects and predicates in the following compound complex sentence. Remember, at this point you're going to have 3 different subjects and predicates in the sentence. Alright? Did you get a chance to pause and look? Good. So although I like to go camping is a what? What type of clause? Dependent clause with a subordinated conjunction here. Although I like to go camping, remember when this comes at the beginning of the sentence, the dependent clause comes at the beginning, our subordinated conjunction is at the front of the sentence, we have to have a comma after that dependent clause. Although I like to go camping, I haven't had the time to go lately, and I haven't found anyone to go with me. I is our subject here, I is our subject here, haven't had the time to go lately, predicate, haven't found anyone to go with me, predicate. I like to go camping, again, I is our subject, like to go camping would be our predicate. Okay. Number 2, we decided that the movie had too much violence, but our children, who like to watch scary movies, thought us wrong. This one's a little bit different because not only do we have a little out of order compared to what our examples have looked like thus far, but we also have not a subordinating conjunction, but we actually have a relative pronoun, who. Right? So, who like to watch scary movies is our dependent clause in this sentence, with who being our relative pronoun, and like to watch scary movies, our children. What function does this dependent clause serve here? Does it serve as a noun, as an adjective, as an adverb? What does it describe? Children, right? So, our children who like to watch scary movies thought us wrong. So, this actually has 2 independent clauses. We decided that the movie had too much violence. So we, subject, decided that the family had too much violence, predicate. But there's our coordinating conjunction with the comma separating the 2 independent clauses. Our children thought us wrong. We could take that dependent clause out, right? And just say our children thought us wrong. So our children would be the subject, thought us wrong would be the predicate. Okay? Now, a few other things for practice that you may do. Remember that complete thoughts always express a full idea. These are our independent clauses, right? So if it's an incomplete thought, it's a dependent clause, we attach that. This is just a review, this is just a reminder of what we've done the past few days. My neighbor lent me his PlayStation because I helped him mow the lawn. Which is the independent clause? Which is the dependent clause? Well, you have to ask yourself, what is the complete thought and what is the incomplete thought? Well, my neighbor lent me his PlayStation is the complete thought. We could take that out of the sentence and it could be a sentence on its own. Because I helped him mow the lawn is an incomplete thought. It doesn't tell the whole story, right? What happened because you helped him mow the lawn, right? If you're struggling to tell something is incomplete or complete, try reading it aloud. Does the statement feel finished? So take a look at these incomplete. Jumping up and down, spinning in circles. Incomplete, right? On the radio with a loud voice. Incomplete, not a complete thought. Right? This is just extending it to think about dependent versus independent clauses. So my English teacher has a jacket that she found at the zoo. Well, we've got to recognize that, right? That she found at the zoo. That, again, is a relative pronoun. It's not a subordinated conjunction, but it's a relative pronoun, and that can still trigger a dependent clause. That she found at the zoo. Well, what did she find at the zoo? Well, my English teacher has a jacket that she found at the zoo. We could take the independent clause out and it would make a complete sentence. Alright? And just as a reminder, Going back to our fanboys, a compound complex sentence has the independent and dependent clause, but also has two independent clauses, right? Remember, two independent clauses will be connected with one of our fanboys, our coordinating conjunctions. This is just a review, right? Now, you may be asked to do something like turn your simple sentence and complex sentence about a movie into one compound complex sentence, right? Read your sentence and circle every subject and underline every predicate, all right? For some reason, this sentence here is circled and not the subject. Circle the subject and underline every predicate. Now, while I have you here, for my class, I'm going to give you an extra credit opportunity. Remember, we've talked about how we find stories in sentences, right? And the action of the story comes in a what? Verb, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to write on your hand a action verb that describes yourself. All right? What are you doing? Like, what is your primary function right now? If you, next time I see you in class, if you come to me and you secretly, not so that everybody can tell, right? This is only for people that watch the video and are paying attention. If you secretly show me your hand and I can read that verb on there, for me it's work. If I can read that word, I'm going to give you a bonus point on your grammar quiz next class. Not a bad deal, right? Alright, so again, you have to secretly show me the verb. Don't let anyone else know. This is just for you watching the video. Alright? You've got to secretly show me that. You can wave to me, you can do a variety of things. You got to show me that word on your hand. Okay? So, by now you should know how to identify subjects, predicates, and direct, indirect, and indirect objects, compose all forms of sentences, and you will have a quiz next class testing your ability to identify all of these sentence forms. Alright? If there are any questions, please ask me or one of your teachers. All three of us will be glad to help. This was a home edition of Grammar Lesson H. Have a good day.